Folks, we have a deal. Congress finally got its head out of its ass long enough to give the American people another round of stimulus. So now it's about $900 billion. And what's in it? Oh, I mean, that's the big question, right? What's in it? What's in it for you? What's in it for your family? What's in it for big corporations? Turns out there's a lot for big corporations and not a lot for you. So let's go into the details here. According to Huffington Post, a final deal would give $300 a week in federal benefits, that's unemployment insurance, to laid off workers on top of state benefits for about 11 weeks. As well as an extra 11 weeks of compensation for people who have been unemployed for so long, they've run out of both their state and federal benefits. And so $300 a week, that's half of what was involved in the CARES Act. So we've had quite a bit of a downgrade. Not good. Now there's also a $600 stimulus check given out to people with roughly the same rules as first check, except that dependents now, instead of receiving $500, will receive $600. So they giveth, but then they taketh away. They take away a lot. By the time the next stimulus happens, and I don't even know if there will be, but if there's another stimulus after this, which there absolutely needs to be, I'm afraid it's going to end up being cut in half again. So now, instead of a $600 stimulus check, you'll have a $300 stimulus check, and then so on and so forth, and at some point, you'll get half a coupon to Chili's. It's 2-for-1 Friday, though. Is that a thing? 2-for-1 Friday? There's a 2-for-1 Tuesday. I don't know. That's what they're doing. So now, what else are they doing? Okay, so that's how it's going to affect you and your family. What about everything else? Well, what about state aid? Okay, well, turns out there is no state and local funding. None. They left that out. There is some additional aid that went to food assistance, as well as $25 billion to establish a new program to provide emergency rental assistance. So they are not canceling rent. There is no real big rent moratorium, anything like that. So what about the business side? Business side. There was some Paycheck Protection Program money, a lot of it. So now the problem, of course, is that you have people like Joel Osteen, who ended up getting about $4.4 million from the original CARES Act, Paycheck Protection Program. So there's not a lot of oversight. People are buying cars and, you know, mega churches are getting money. The big chain stores, chain restaurants, they're getting money when they don't necessarily need it. And so you have this lack of oversight, and the lion's share of this money, of course, at least $200 billion, went towards the Paycheck Protection Program with very, very, as I said, little oversight. Now, something that did get left out was liability insurance for corporations. At least it's good. That, you know, we're not going to allow corporations to be able to, you know, screw people over and not provide, you know, PPE and everything like that, and not give people the recourse if they get sick. So that's really important. So that is something that didn't make the final bill. But nonetheless, companies got a lot of goodies. They made off pretty well in this. In fact, the Washington Post reported on Sunday that the 3 martini lunch tax deduction was included as a part of this bill. Now, what the hell is that? So basically, it allows companies to deduct the full cost of business meals off their taxes. So, hey man, free lunches, free dinners, free corporate dinners for everybody. I mean, if you're an executive. If you're not an executive, well, screw you. Don't you have $600 to go spend? Don't spend it all in one place. I mean, what could rent cost anyway in this country? $600 should be able to hold you for another 6 months at least. I mean, you know, that's kind of like how they calculated the $1,200, right? Since, you know, $1,200, that should last you for a long time. In fact, they're saying that, you know, you should be fine until March, next March, with the $600. Now, here's the funny thing about this, and it's all a joke. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin included that meal deduction as a White House priority. Gee, I wonder why. Why is that a priority for you? Oh, right, because you're all business executives. Yeah, of course. So free corporate meals for you, right? Here's the thing. Most people are not going to use this. The corporations don't even need this. And it will come to about a couple, $1 billion, which is still a hell of a lot of money. You could use that to go and send people additional monies for checks and things like that, instead of doing, free corporate lunches. I thought there was no such thing as a free lunch. Well, I guess unless you're a giant multinational corporation and you get all the free lunch you want. But here's the thing, it's not going to do anything for restaurants. So the White House is saying, well, this is for the restaurant industry so they can, make money. But wait, we have a pandemic going on. Nobody wants to eat at the restaurant. The swanky ass executives, they're not going to want to eat at the restaurants. They're not going to want to have 3-hour business lunches that are paid for by the taxpayer. So, but it's just another bullshit giveaway. But understand, this is what Republicans love to do. In exchange for this, Republicans, by the way, agreed to expand tax credits for low-income families and the working poor in the final package. So, business corporate lunches in exchange for tax credits for poor people. So understand that's the priority. And I point that out because, again, while this is a really terrible bill, a shitty bill, Republicans actually wanted to make it shittier for you in service of their own donors. I mean, again, this is bad. $600 is not going to pay the rent for anybody, okay? Millions of people are right now operating with back rent that they cannot afford to pay. How much? There's an earlier report this month that came out that says that Americans collectively owe about $70 billion in back rent. The millions of Americans right now that have been, have lost their jobs or in all of this, from the pandemic. And obviously we did not pass that good of a stimulus from the CARES Act to begin with because it didn't have a UBI, it didn't have rent cancellation. And so now as a result, $70 billion worth of back rent. I mentioned earlier that there's $25 billion allotted for that rent program. $25 billion is not $70 billion. It is less than $70 billion, which means it is not going to help the majority of people that are behind on their rent right now. Much less, again, the $600. It's not going to touch back rent. Much less food, health insurance, utilities, of which Americans are also behind on. This is not a stimulus check. It is a survival check that barely allows anyone to survive. Now, it was so bad that even Donald Trump, and I know he only wants to do it because of course, he wants to get people to support his coup, his clown coup. But he was saying, let's do $2,000. And he had to get literally restrained, well, not literally. He had to get restrained and held back by his aides because they're like, no, you're going to blow up the negotiations. How dare you demand $2,000? Which here's the thing. The Democrats would probably go, no, okay, here's what the Democrats would do. Trump would go, $2,000. I can get Mitch McConnell to do this. And if Mitch McConnell ever did, Democrats would still be like, oh no, let's go down to $1,200. They always negotiate from a stance of weakness. It's insane. And then he'd be like, Republicans, wonderful, wonderful Republicans, they were so generous and gracious enough to give you $1,200. Democrats. But again, you have polling, and this is where the Democrats really fail on this. You have support from the American people that shows that, over like a vast majority, over 80% of Americans in some polls support stimulus checks of at least $1,200. Okay, and yet Nancy Pelosi, she's an awful negotiator. Okay, she has terrible political instincts. In fact, right after this had passed, here's what she said on the floor. Take a look.
We also have in the legislation direct payments, which were not in the Republican bill, to America's working families. I would like them been bigger, but they are significant, and they will be going out soon.
They're significant. That's what someone who is out of touch says. $600 is not significant. Nancy Pelosi is worth over $100 million. That's not significant, $600. If she had good political instincts, she'd be like, look, this is the best that we can get. Why is it the best that we can get? Because Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has blocked everything that we put up. Every single thing. If you elect us, and if you give us control of the Senate, we will give you $2,000 a month in a UBI. We will pass that immediately. But you got to put us in power. You got to put us in power. But instead, she's like, oh, it's not as big as what I want, but it's still pretty significant. Yeah, thank you to Mitch McConnell. And by the way, you're allowing Mitch McConnell to look like some sort of pragmatic deal maker. Like Mitch McConnell, oh, the wonderful bipartisan Mitch McConnell. What a good job in negotiating with us so that we can come up with this wonderful bipartisan deal. Are you kidding me? Terrible, terrible political instincts. Terrible. And look, in fact, she had turned down, and this is what's even worse, she had previously turned down another stimulus package, which would have been double the size, $1.8 trillion, right? Now, this was before the election, and she turned it down for completely political reasons. And guess what? It bit her in the ass. It didn't work. What a complete failure of leadership. And the Senate didn't even consider the Sanders-Hawley bill, which would have been $1,200. Again, not what we need. The Progressive Caucus, I believe, was putting up, trying to push a $2,000 a month UBI. Sanders and Hawley got together. In fact, Josh Hawley's a Republican, very conservative, comes out and says, look, this is a disgrace. This is terrible. How could we not put $1,200 into people's pockets? Bernie Sanders out there is saying essentially the same thing about this bipartisan compromise. And yet Nancy Pelosi, it's like, oh, well, it's adequate. No, it's not. Out of touch, 100%. And again, this is what you expect, what I've come to expect in America. We put corporate profits and tax breaks above the needs of the American people, who are teetering right on the edge and are falling over. Even with this stimulus check, they are falling off the edge. And yet, again, Senator Mitch McConnell, who has been pushing bills without any sort of stimulus, without any sort of help for the American people, all for corporations, here's what he said. We can finally report what our nation has needed to hear for a very long time. More help is on the way. More help is on the way. And that's, and the Democrats don't fight against this, against that. Mitch McConnell is nicknamed the Grim Reaper because he has killed so many bills. And as a result, by the way, of not passing these bills until so late, you've had millions of people lose their house, their houses, their homes. People are starving. They're stealing to survive. And yes, people have died as well. So yeah, he's totally the Grim Reaper. Progressives, of course, push back on this. Rashida Tlaib, here's what she asked after that. More help for who? How are the millions of people facing evictions, remaining unemployed, standing in food bank and soup kitchen lines supposed to live off $600? We didn't just send help. We didn't sell help for 8 months. This is not leadership. There's no compassion, just politics of greed and power. Well, one thing that I think progressives don't quite understand is that you have to, in order to project power, you have to amass power as well. And so Mitch McConnell is probably about the most ruthless at projecting and amassing power. We need somebody on the progressive side who is ruthless, but for a good cause. I think somebody who knows the rules, who plays the game, but for good ends, and that is really difficult to find, almost impossible, for many, many different reasons. But we do need someone who will push our policies and our side as aggressively as someone like Mitch McConnell, but in a way that actually works and does things and gets results. And I don't know if we have this. All right, more. Representative Rokana also said this. He said that while he intends to vote yes in the package because it's urgent and a lifeline, the final deal is, quote, far less than what we need, far less than we could have gotten earlier this year. And he's 100% right on both of those. He added 8 million have fallen into poverty since June. If we hadn't made this deal today, 12 million Americans were going to lose unemployment benefits. But again, this is not nearly enough for the people. Survival bill, not a progressive one. Bottom line, we're going to come back in January to keep working on this in the new Congress. And I hope they do. Because this can't be all the help Americans are getting. I understand that, like, you also have to work with Mitch McConnell right now, okay? Mitch McConnell, as I said before, he's a Machiavellian genius. He doesn't give a goddamn about anybody. Just cares about his own power, and that's it. And his own power is money, legacy, et cetera, right? He's going to stonewall you. There are ways to get around that, but you do have to get involved in electoral politics. I know we don't like to stain our hands with the dirtiness of electoral politics, but in the way that the country works, you do have to do some of that while also doing direct action. And I support both of those approaches. You have to do both. You have to get involved in both. And so direct action for things like stimulus checks, for things like Medicare for all that stuff is wonderful. And we should absolutely do that. But also there is electoral politics involved too. We can't just do one and not the other. And so, and look, as far as leadership goes, I've shown you weak leadership. What does strong leadership mean? Well, we have to make big demands, but be willing to offend Republicans and corporate Democrats for calling them out for their hostility when it comes to helping the working class. Remember, part of this bipartisan compromise was Joe Manchin. So Manchin calls himself a Democrat, really not that good of one. More of a Republican than anything else. And not kowtowing to those people, but instead going towards the people who are overwhelmingly in favor of at least $1,200 stimulus. And of course, you also have to call out corruption where it sits, but also that involves not being corrupt, or at least not being out of touch, which unfortunately Nancy Pelosi is both. And so we do need that strong leadership. We do need to be able to be willing to offend our Republican colleagues and corporate Democrats in order to push the things, but we also have to be strategic as well on how we do this and how we leverage power. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's a very fine line that you have to walk. And understandably, not everybody has the ability and skill to do that. And so we've got to figure it out. We've got to figure out how to do it because, again, what we're getting from our government is not enough. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.